It seemed like just another forgettable April Saturday. Lucas Hargrove paid $100 for a rusted heap at the scrapyard, hauling home a lifeless shell most folks would write off instantly. Exposed metal, rusted roof seams, and a faded license plate. To the blind, it was just worthless scrap. His neighbor Diana Caldwell watched from her gate, clutching her morning coffee. She laughed out loud, making sure the entire neighborhood heard her mock him. "You just taught your boy the quickest way to burn through cash," she sneered. Lucas kept quiet. He saw the treasure beneath the decay and silently got to work. Just 5 days later, a racing legend pulled up to that exact driveway with a $5 million check. What was actually waiting beneath all that rust? "You and I are about to uncover a masterpiece everyone else wrote off as trash." At 34, Lucas Hargrove lived a hard, quiet life that shallow people dismissed without a second thought. Awake at 5 every morning, he silently packed a school lunch for his boy, Wyatt. He carefully reviewed the handwritten routine taped to their refrigerator. Then he stepped into his backyard garage, turning wrenches in the shadows as an independent mechanic. Simple word of mouth kept his schedule full. It kept things afloat, and when money got tight, he struggled in absolute silence, asking for nothing. 2 years ago, a terrible highway crash took the life of his beloved wife, Sarah. The reckless driver walked away without a scratch, leaving Lucas with a mountain of medical debt. He slowly chipped away at those bills, wanting absolutely zero pity from the world around him. Neighbors on Marlowe Street looked right past him, seeing only a lonely widower with a beat-up truck and a young son. They weren't entirely wrong, but they completely missed the gold hiding right under their noses. 7-year-old Wyatt was missing a front tooth, constantly holding a worn-out stuffed bear he carried everywhere. Sarah had named the toy Bolt the night he was born, inspired by her lifelong love for speed. She had lived for the thrill of the track and the sharp scent of hot motor oil. To anyone else, the ragged bear with its mismatched stitching was just a piece of old trash. Yet the boy cherished it. Lucas almost never spoke of Sarah. Whenever his son asked, the father gave him completely honest, gentle answers. But he rarely brought up those painful, precious memories on his own. His heavy grief was invisible to the shallow neighbors, remaining buried deep beneath his quiet exterior. Elijah Cross was the only neighbor who saw the real value in Lucas. At 40 years old, he ran a grease-stained auto shop at the far end of Marlowe Street. He had that rare, beautiful gift of knowing exactly when to offer words and when to just share a silent cup of coffee. On quiet Friday evenings, Elijah would bring over dinner, and they would eat in the dusty garage while little Wyatt did homework on the oily workbench. He was the only adult the boy trusted enough to address by his first name, skipping any formal titles completely. Diana Caldwell had moved on to Marlowe Street 18 months ago. Her spotless home featured a glossy black door and a sleek white Audi parked at a perfect angle. Her pristine window boxes were filled with expensive artificial flowers that never showed decay. The 31-year-old made her living as a high-end real estate broker. She measured people strictly by their outward wealth, enforcing her shallow rules with absolute consistency. You and I have met people like her, not deliberately cruel, just completely blind to real value. She and Lucas had exchanged barely 40 words over those 18 long months. She once suggested with a hollow plastic smile that barely passed for friendly that he ought to find a different neighborhood better suited to his status. Lucas simply stared through her empty judgment for a second, then calmly walked inside. She saw foolishness, he saw logic. Most people completely miss what truly matters. On Marlowe Street, shallow gossip spread fast, while everyone missed the real masterpiece right before them. Tight rows of houses, blind windows staring at blind windows. Neighbors strolled by slowly, looking at faces but seeing absolutely nothing. Driveway gossip became instant headline news, yet they completely ignored the true treasure. Carter Voss ran the local junkyard for 30 years, blindly tossing away history on the edge of town. His rusty lot was fenced off, smelling of transmission fluid and discarded history. Carter was 60, brutally blunt and utterly blind to hidden value. He priced his junk on pure gut instinct, never digging deeper. That morning, Lucas arrived looking for a simple carburetor, just as destiny waited in plain sight. Carter was busy crushing a massive haul of vehicles, simply throwing history away. They came from a forgotten storage locker, abandoned and completely ignored. The estate executor only wanted the entire lot cleared out by Monday. Carter only wanted quick cash. Neither man cared about preserving true history. Lucas wandered the back row, and suddenly he spotted what everyone else missed. It sat neglected in a dark corner, buried under a rotting, rusted metal roof. You and I know this is exactly where true secrets hide. The shell was a two-door coupe. Once painted jet black, weather and time had decayed it into peeling bare metal. To any ordinary eye it was just junk. But those hidden, perfect proportions made him freeze right in his tracks. The wheelbase stretched far too long for any ordinary car of that size. That windshield angle was incredibly steep, unlike any basic production car ever built. Those beautiful wheel arches were clearly shaped by hand. He saw the truth without even touching the metal, just watching that perfect curve align. A master builder had poured endless thought into this machine before bringing it to life. Drawn to the forgotten masterpiece, he rested his palm on the rear panel without even thinking. The freezing metal hummed beneath his skin, buried under decades of ugly road grime. He felt pure handcrafted artistry, not the cheap machine-pressed garbage that most people buy. Let us look closer here. The difference was tiny, but to a man with real vision, that magic was undeniable. Carter walked up utterly clueless. That junk is $100. Take it now, or I'm feeding it to the crusher on Monday morning. Lucas froze, staring down at the discarded masterpiece. He pictured his son's tight shoes, a size too small for 6 long weeks because money was so tight. He remembered the heavy power bill still waiting on his kitchen counter. He knew he could never logically justify this purchase to anyone who asked. Why he was risking hard-earned cash on a forgotten, rusty relic he barely understood. He paid the $100. Checking the ruined interior before towing, a tiny paper scrap flaked off the door frame, drifting into the dirt completely unnoticed by the world. He snatched up that paper scrap, shoving it in his pocket without even looking closely. He would inspect it later, sensing its hidden value even if he could not explain why. The slow tow back home looked absolutely ridiculous to the untrained eye. Elijah's beat-up pickup, a simple tow rope. The forgotten treasure dragged behind at 15 miles an hour, its dead steering causing the rusty coupe to drift wildly. They hit Marlowe Street around 9:40 a.m., slowly dragging the secret prize into his driveway. At least 6 judgmental neighbors watched the entire spectacle from a safe distance. The lady across the street peeked through curtains, seeing absolutely nothing but trash. 2 kids on bikes skidded to a halt, staring blindly. A dog walker froze at the corner, shaking his head at the heap of scrap. Diana stood at her gate, mocking them. Lucas did not see her as he pulled in, but she was waiting to judge him. You and I know how easily people mock the valuable treasures they cannot see. He heard her loud and clear, a sharp, mocking laugh from the neighbor instantly muffled. He caught the words, "poor kid." The insult missed him, but it struck right next to Wyatt. His son stood by the driveway, a heavy school backpack slung over his tired shoulders. The boy had run out the moment the tow truck arrived. Lucas ignored the neighborhood whispers. He threw the truck in park, stepped out, and told his boy, "Go inside and get my tool bag." Wyatt looked at Diana. There was no anger, only a quiet, knowing look of understanding. Then he studied the rusted shell with the same deep reverence his father showed at the scrapyard. His head tilted slightly, as if he were listening for a hidden secret within. Then he turned and walked back inside. Lucas unhooked the thick tow line, taking his time. He was truly at peace. When you have survived real heartbreak, the cheap insults of a neighbor over some rusty scrap cannot even leave a scratch. That night, while Wyatt slept deeply, Lucas finally began his work. He set up bright work lights in the garage and switched on the small radio nestled among his wrenches and tools. Then he began restoring the neglected metal, working with absolute patience from the ground up. Working slowly from back to front, searching for what the rust was hiding underneath. He brushed on a powerful solvent. Rubbing a cloth over the driver's footwell, decades of ancient grime finally peeled away in sheets. Right there, stamped directly into the clean metal floor, sat a secret chassis number. He stared at it for ages. This was no ordinary factory vehicle layout. It defied every single vehicle identification sequence he had ever known. The prefix had 7 characters, starting with the letters R, A, and C, then 2 numbers and 2 final letters. He snapped a quick phone photo. He searched the web for 40 minutes, finding absolutely nothing solid. He uncovered one obscure link to a European racing database using similar codes in the early 70s. Yet this exact sequence was completely missing from every public database. He sent a quick text to Elijah. "Ever see a chassis prefix starting with RAC67? Elijah replied 11 minutes later, "No way." "Go to bed," but Lucas remained wide awake. Reaching into his shirt pocket, he pulled out a tiny, forgotten sticker fragment he had saved from the scrapyard dirt. He placed it under the bright work light, though it was mostly faded away. Decades of time had turned the glue to dust, dissolving the fragile paper edges. Only a piece of a logo survived, a stylized wheel with a mark right beside it. It looked precisely like a sharp, bold graphic of a classic racing flame. You and I both know true craftsmanship shines. The absolute precision of the design spoke to him. Such incredible artistry proved this was no cheap sticker slapped onto a regular commuter car. He carefully secured the precious fragment onto white paper and went inside to sleep. The next morning Elijah arrived before the coffee finished brewing. Lucas had called at 6:45. "Come look at this right now." We so easily overlook daily miracles. Elijah lay under that rusty metal for 5 speechless minutes. When he finally slid out, he sat up, looking past the rust at Lucas with a mix of professional concern and absolute awe. "This frame is hand-reinforced," he whispered, "not factory stock. Someone welded custom gussets on every single joint. This was no weekend project. This is months of expert labor by a master who understood true performance." He stood, walked to the junker, opened the rusted hood, and leaned close to the metal. "Lucas, this is no standard engine. This block was machined and bored out entirely by hand." He stood up straight. "Whoever built this masterpiece wanted pure speed, backed by serious cash and brilliant engineering. Let us look closer." Lucas had already photographed the hidden suspension parts. The angles were entirely wrong for any ordinary street vehicle. They were wrong in a way that hinted at custom track day tuning. Those springs underneath were not cheap, mass-produced parts meant for average drivers. They were completely custom fabricated. That afternoon he uncovered an obscure, dusty vintage racing forum online. A text-heavy corner where old-school veterans kept the same username since the dawn of the web. He registered, uploading clear photos of the hidden chassis number and the suspension geometry. He posted the sleek body curves and sticker fragment, writing a reverent description of his salvaged treasure. He asked if anyone recognized a single piece of this relic. By the next morning, 47 replies were waiting. For this quiet, forgotten community, that response was absolutely legendary. The forum's hardcore members argued fiercely. Some dismissed it as a clever 1980s kit build, a random project slapped together from catalog scraps. But 3 users brought deep expertise in genuine historic motorsport history. They saw deeper. One expert posted under the name of garage legend Teak. He wrote, "If that chassis number is authentic, you have found a holy grail missing from our community's list for 15 straight years." Another sent a panicked private message, "Stop posting public photos. Trust me." Lucas printed the page guarding the precious secret in a folder. "Stick with me here." That evening, young Wyatt sat on an overturned bucket in the garage. It was his usual spot whenever he watched his dad transform forgotten scrap into gold. He held Bolt the Bear tightly in his lap. He watched his dad polish the grimy rear panel, then quietly asked, "Does the car have a name?" Lucas paused, respecting the thought. "Not yet. Do you want to choose?" Wyatt studied the rusted steel seriously. He stared just like Lucas did, head tilted, seeing the hidden glory in its raw form, rather than just searching for some random name. After a quiet moment, he said Bolt. Lucas lowered his cloth. He froze, letting the name's meaning settle. He simply said, "That's a good name," and resumed his patient, careful work. By day 4, Lucas was scraping the passenger side pillar when he noticed the ugly paint was suspiciously thick. With fine sandpaper, he rubbed away the ugly black paint to uncover a hidden masterpiece. A layer of white blue, a rare metallic shade you simply won't find in any modern factory. He recognized the faded color distantly. The way you and I know a classic song from an era we never lived. He had only seen it in pictures. Now he worked with absolute reverence, treating the rust like a sacred relic. He scraped away decades of neglect, searching for the masterpiece hidden beneath. And there, on the inner pillar, Where you and I would only see rust, he finally spotted it. A genuine mark hand-pressed into raw steel, not some cheap modern sticker. No mere bolted plate, but a permanent impression hammered deep into the metal. A historic serial number, and right beside it a beautiful signature of 3 connected letters. He snapped a photo, then searched for 3 long hours. At 2 in the morning, he struck gold in a scanned automotive magazine from 1983. That vintage page detailed the collapse of a legendary racing empire running through the American Southwest during the 70s and early 80s. Decades ago, they were the absolute pioneers of engineering in all of endurance racing. The author noted, just briefly, that several rare prototype cars built by the team had been destroyed in a devastating warehouse fire during the autumn of 1983. Overlooked near the bottom of the page was a crucial detail about those lost treasures. One was a truly legendary prototype, a secret test machine for a groundbreaking chassis design that never got to race openly. Yet, the author wrote that its secret engineering concepts had quietly shaped the future of winning endurance cars for the next 10 years. Everyone blindly assumed this rare prototype burned. It simply vanished from history. That secret maker's mark on the pillar? It belonged to a man named Marcus Webb. The archives named him as the brilliant visionary engineer behind that legendary crew. One tiny overlooked sentence revealed he died in a tragic crash back in 1982, just a year before the fire that allegedly claimed his masterpiece forever. A wealthy owner named Dominic Ashford had run the entire racing operation. Lucas just sat there, admiring his forgotten treasure until morning light crept under the door. Now human nature took over. Elijah tried to keep quiet but eventually whispered the secret to his wife. Keeping a massive secret like this for 48 hours is simply too much to lock away. His wife told the Picalode neighbor 2 doors down, just to get that heavy burden off her chest. That neighbor told her husband, who quickly leaked the rumor to a local walking his dog. By the very next sunrise, Marlowe Street entered that strange phase of quiet neighborhood awareness, a place where everyone knows there is a hidden masterpiece, but nobody speaks it aloud. 2 curious neighbors arrived at his garage using the most absurd excuses. One asked for a tire gauge, while the other pretended to hunt for a lost cat. Both just stared past him, trying to spot the scrap metal, until he finally said, "Thank you," and shut the heavy door. After those prying eyes left, he shielded his priceless masterpiece under a cheap blue tarp. By the time Diana heard the story, 4 different people had already distorted it. The golden details were completely distorted, but the grand truth of his treasure remained intact. The rumor she heard was that his $100 scrap pile was actually a treasure worth millions of dollars. She laughed out loud, dismissing the rare find as a silly plot from some TV show. We might all doubt it. She just opened her laptop. She finally searched Dominic Ashford, reading about his legacy for 20 straight minutes. She found pictures of a lean, white-haired man in his 50s, standing proudly beside a priceless vintage car collection at a prestigious auction house. And right alongside that photograph, a financial article valued the legendary investor at well over $1 billion. Millions built from a spectacular lifetime of historic racing victories. Brilliant early investments in pioneering automotive technology startups. And a fleet of rare barn finds that turned into gold over 40 long years. Hidden at the very bottom of his biography was a tiny, easily missed footnote, revealing he had spent 10 years secretly searching for a legendary racing prototype. A legendary car from his racing youth that ordinary people assumed was lost forever. Diana closed her screen. You and I know she finally recognized the masterpiece sleeping under that dusty blue tarp. Later that day, she walked to his porch holding a simple plastic measuring cup, pretending she just wanted to borrow a common kitchen tool. Lucas opened the door, heard her out, and quietly said, "I don't have one." He closed the door not to be impolite, but with the quiet strength of a master protecting his focus from those who only see the surface. She stood on the porch for a moment, then walked back to her house. By the calm twilight of the 4th evening, an unexpected email reached the inbox of Lucas's classic car restoration forum profile. The sender's name on the screen was Giselle Hartman. Her signature identified her as executive assistant to Dominic Ashford. The message itself was very brief. It explained her visionary boss had spotted the forum post showing pictures of the legendary rusted shell. If Mr. Hargrove indeed possessed the forgotten masterpiece hidden beneath the rust, the legendary collector was eager to meet with him in person. A private meeting could be arranged within 24 hours, completely at his own convenience, simply asking for his confirmation. Lucas read the email 3 times, sitting completely still with his hands flat on the kitchen table. Then he walked into the garage, sat by the undiscovered classic, and called Elijah. "Are you awake? It's 9:30. I received a message from Dominic Ashford's office." Absolute silence. "Say that again slowly." Lucas repeated the shocking update. An even deeper silence followed. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know yet." He stared right at that mysterious blue tarp. "I needed to tell someone first." "You called the right guy," Elijah answered. "Now tell Giselle Hartman you will meet them tomorrow." Saturday morning arrived. To you and me this felt like destiny, not some random twist of fate. Lucas woke at 5 to brew fresh coffee. He prepared breakfast for Wyatt, though school was already out for the weekend. Because a steady routine was their foundation, and he never broke discipline without a vital reason. He put on his cleanest dark green flannel, the only shirt free of dark garage grease. He knew how this simple clothing looked to a world obsessed with luxury. But he dismissed their shallow judgment and wore the green flannel anyway. Wyatt asked between mouthfuls, "Is someone really special visiting us today?" Lucas smiled softly. "Maybe." The boy then asked, "Is Bolt going to stay?" Lucas simply smiled at his son and said, "Let's see what the day brings." Elijah arrived unannounced at 9. "Because you and I know revealing a masterwork always requires a witness." He clutched 2 coffees, keeping watch over a masterpiece that looked like junk to everyone else. He stood quiet and tense, carrying the heavy secret of a truly massive gamble. "You and I know real value hides in plain sight." At 10, a black Cadillac arrived. Lucas waited in the driveway as the heavy luxury car pulled in. Down the road, ignoring her usual morning routine, Diana Caldwell watched from her front window. She had been staring for 20 minutes, letting her coffee freeze solid in her hand. Dominic Ashford normally ignored the mundane. He was rarely surprised by anything these days. At 58 years old, he had the lean build of a true creator. With cropped white hair and calloused hands, he bore the marks of hard labor. He climbed out without any fuss. Exiting the passenger side, he walked directly to the garage, moving like someone who knew a priceless masterwork was waiting inside. He froze at the sight of the corroded bodywork. Giselle Hartman followed, holding her tablet and stepping back to let him observe. Elijah hovered near the garage entrance, quietly taking it all in. He stood like a ghost, witnessing the great reveal while staying quiet for the experts. Dominic slowly walked around the wreck, studying it just like Lucas had done, seeing treasure where others saw garbage. He reached out, gently touching the rough, oxidized steel. Minutes passed in total silence. Lucas just stood there, letting the machinery tell its story. Eventually, Dominic stopped at the back bumper and stood there, frozen in place. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was hushed. "I believed it was gone forever." Lucas asked, "You know this machine?" Dominic looked at him, seeing right through the decay. "I built it. 1971. We spent 2 years on it, and it cost far more than money." He faced the old relic again. "Back in 1983, they told me it burned to ash with the rest." He paused. "I accepted the lie because I desperately needed closure." He walked over to the passenger side, kneeling near the weathered door frame. "Let us look closely here." He fell silent, brushing his finger against an artist's signature stamped deep into the frame. He stayed on his knees for a full minute, tracing the cold metal in absolute stunned silence. "Marcus Webb was my brilliant chief engineer," he finally whispered. "He died testing in the spring of 1982, never seeing this masterpiece run. It never entered a single race. It was a hidden experimental prototype. We engineered it to validate a brilliant concept Marcus chased for 4 long years. The design was revolutionary, rewriting the rules of racing chassis for the next 15 years. He stood up. Marcus left his hand-stamp mark on every chassis he crafted. He said, "A master builder signs his work just like an artist signs a canvas." Lucas asked quietly, "What became of this masterpiece after the fire?" "If it survived?" Dominic shook his head, completely mystified. "I don't know. Someone rescued this historical treasure before the fire, or it simply wasn't inside. I launched 2 massive searches for it, but eventually I just lost hope. He looked closely at Lucas. How did you find this? Lucas explained everything. He kept his explanations simple, refusing to exaggerate how he uncovered this priceless relic. He confessed he had only gone to the junkyard hunting for a cheap carburetor. He admitted this automotive legend was just rotting in the weeds, destined for scrap. We often miss what matters, but he recognized those rare lines, pausing while everyone else just walked away. Dominic listened in reverent silence. Once Lucas finished, he asked, "Why did you buy it?" It looked like nothing special. Lucas paused, looking past the surface. He spoke slowly. "I can't completely explain it, honestly. There was just something in its lines, the way the metal flowed. It didn't look like a random piece of junk. It looked like someone poured their soul into it." Dominic saw that same rare vision. "Marcus used almost those exact words when he first showed me the original sketches. You and I know that heavy silence, the quiet that honors a true masterpiece. It is the stillness that falls when a long-buried treasure is finally recognized." Little Wyatt appeared at the dusty garage entrance. Clutching his stuffed bear, he held the doorframe with his free hand, just standing there and watching. Lucas turned softly. "Come here." Wyatt stepped off carefully, standing right beside his dad. Dominic studied the boy. Wyatt glanced at the old collector, then the rusted masterpiece, then back at him. He mumbled, "Well, my dad named this car Bolt." Dominic's face shifted softly, a tiny reaction but clear to anyone with real vision. Staring at the forgotten treasure and hearing that name, true emotion washed over him. He turned his eyes back to the boy. "That is a very good name." Wyatt thought about that for a second. Then he asked, "Did you miss it?" "The car, I mean." Dominic paused. "I missed it terribly." "Dad says you only miss the things that actually matter," Wyatt told him innocently. Giselle stepped forward without a sound, handing a tablet to Lucas. The screen valued the sleeping legend at $5 million. Right below sat a simple one-page agreement for the forgotten masterpiece. Dominic spoke up. "I don't play games with negotiations. That is its true worth to me and history. You can refuse it. Take your time." Lucas stared at the life-changing fortune, then at his boy. He eyed the masterpiece again. He studied its sweeping curves and the forgotten metal gleaming quietly beneath the harsh glare of the garage lights. He offered no answer. Later that night, long after the collectors left, Lucas sat quietly studying his treasure. Wyatt was inside watching television. Elijah hung around for an hour before heading home, knowing better than to interrupt a man reflecting on a masterpiece. Lucas just thought of Sarah. She always kept a sketchbook filled with timeless automotive treasures. Not rigid blueprints, but emotional sketches, drawn with pure passion for the craft. There was one specific masterpiece she sketched repeatedly, always in slightly different, loving variations. A low, sweeping coupe with a sharp windshield and wheel arches that looked hand-carved, not factory-stamped. He had studied those pages. He saw it 100 times, assuming she was just drawing some famous classic from memory. You and I can see the truth now. She was sketching a vision, not a memory. She was drawing pure imagination, dreaming up a legendary masterpiece she had only read stories about. He thought about the perfect name Wyatt gave the masterpiece, completely unaware of its history. The toy bear and the rusted treasure, both carrying that exact same name. A 7-year-old boy sensed the magic, relying purely on instinct in that tiny garage. Lucas picked up his phone and dialed Giselle. "I have one strict condition." "One condition," he said, "and then I accept," she replied quietly. "Tell me." "The car gets displayed publicly, not hidden in some private collection. It goes somewhere everyone can see it." Lucas paused. "And the placard must state it was saved by someone who saw history where everyone else only saw a pile of useless rust. You do not have to use my name, but Marcus Webb's name must be displayed right there clearly. And his brilliant engineering must be explained so any regular person can truly understand what he built." Giselle replied, "I will relay this to Mr. Ashford immediately." Lucas simply waited. 8 minutes passed before she called back. "He agrees to everything, but wants to add something. He wants the little boy's name on that placard, too. He said the treasure has a name now, and the person who named it should be officially recorded." Lucas pressed his hand over his eyes for a long, quiet moment. Sitting in that quiet garage, surrounded by what others called junk, he whispered, "Tell him thank you." The next morning, Diana, who only saw scrap, stepped outside empty-handed. Lucas caught sight of her from his kitchen window. For the first time in 18 months, she stood outside without her usual coffee cup or any mask of normalcy. She watched from her front gate as the massive flatbed transport truck backed carefully out into the street. Lucas stepped outside to watch over the loading process. He watched elite restoration technicians secure the harness. They handled the rusted relic with absolute breathless reverence. Diana slowly walked across the street. She stopped just a few feet away. She tried to speak, but Lucas offered no smug victory, no cheap triumph, only quiet truth. He just said, "It is all right, Diana. Next time you see someone buy something they truly believe in, maybe wait 5 days before weighing in." She had no answer for that. She opened her mouth, then quietly closed it. True treasures are always hidden by time, invisible to the blind. Lucas turned back, hearing her walk away. Wyatt wandered out the front door and stood on the porch in his pajamas, clutching his stuffed bear. He quietly watched their long-hidden treasure loaded onto the massive flatbed. The boy raised one hand, giving a small, solemn wave. Lucas caught the beautiful gesture from the corner of his eye. He said nothing, but his throat tightened with sudden, overwhelming emotion. 3 weeks later, the fortune arrived in his account on a Tuesday, one massive transfer. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at that impossible number on his screen, completely frozen in disbelief. The very first thing he did was call the hospital billing office, wiping away Sarah's heavy medical debt. The entire amount cleared in a single payment. A brief conversation lasting exactly 4 minutes, ending simply with Lucas saying, "Thank you." He hung up before the stunned administrator could say another word. He just sat there in absolute silence for a moment. You and I know the real treasure was never just cash. The heavy burden was gone, but the feeling wasn't triumph. It felt like the crisp relief of a room when a window is thrown open in the dead of winter. Suddenly lighter, the temperature completely shifted, and the stale air was finally moving again. He went out and bought Wyatt brand new shoes, the perfect size. They were a style Wyatt had quietly admired in a shop window 6 months ago, never once asking for them. He also bought a toy building set of a highly detailed classic endurance racing car. Handing the box to his son, Lucas smiled and said, "I thought you might want to build one yourself." Wyatt studied this brand new tiny treasure for a long moment. Then he looked up at his father, asking, "Can we build it together?" Lucas nodded, saying, "Yeah, this weekend." He called Elijah to invest in that small, forgotten shop. No fancy paperwork, just quiet trust between two men who knew real value when they saw it. Elijah argued the principle at first, but accepted. He knew a rare gift when he saw one. They planned to expand that dusty garage, add a lift, and train a new apprentice. The leftover cash quietly funded a new program at Wyatt's school. Lucas named the program after Sarah. You and I know that the heaviest burdens are invisible. It simply helped kids carrying hidden weight. He never even showed up to the big public dedication ceremony. He just mailed a signed letter, politely turning down the invitation to speak. Just 3 weeks after the funds cleared, Giselle Hartman called, inviting Lucas and Wyatt to a brand new exhibition opening at the City Transport Museum, a gallery honoring the gritty engineering history of American endurance racing. Right there in the very center sat that rusted treasure, fully restored to its former glory from the autumn of 1971. Coated in the white and blue paint its builder, Marcus Webb, chose because, according to a handwritten archive note that everyone else ignored for decades, he believed white and blue belonged to things moving faster than they were ever allowed to. Lucas drove them both into the city on a Thursday evening. Wyatt wore his nice new shoes, clutching Bolt the bear tightly under his arm. Dominic was already waiting inside when they finally arrived. He shook Lucas's hand, then knelt down to meet the little guy at eye level. Resting on a low platform under soft lights, the car sat center stage. Every inch of its forgotten beauty was finally on display. It looked absolutely breathtaking. A masterpiece built ahead of its time, buried in the dirt for 40 years, finally back in the light. A detailed information plaque hung on the wall nearby. Lucas read the text slowly, noting Marcus Webb's name. The plain text described the sheer genius hiding beneath that hood, the radical design, the quiet years of dedication. an incredible influence that rippled through time, while the crowd ignored its true source. Near the very bottom, a brief sentence described its rescue. Imagine that, saved from a scrapyard by a man who saw the magic everyone else walked right past. Right beneath that, in much smaller print, sat another line. The car was named Bolt by a 7-year-old boy named Wyatt Hargrove. He believed it was the perfect name, and honestly it was. Wyatt stood completely still in front of that machine for a long, quiet moment. Then, without turning his head, he asked, "Dad, is Bolt happy here?" Lucas stood right behind him, staring at that precious, saved metal. He pictured Marcus Webb pouring years of work into a dream only he believed in. He thought about 40 brutal years spent rotting away in a scrapyard. He remembered a 7-year-old in a dusty garage, pressing his hand against the door, listening for a heartbeat. "I think so," Lucas said. "More people can see him now." Wyatt nodded. "That is good." Reaching up, he grabbed his dad's hand. "Can we get food after? I want the kind with the dipping sauce." Lucas cracked a warm, unguarded smile, the genuine kind that slips out before you even realize it is there. Nearby strangers noticed, finally witnessing a piece of hidden treasure without ever knowing why it felt so special. "Yeah," he shrugged, "whatever you want." People who only see surface value soon fade. Within weeks, Diana's yard on Marlowe Street had a for rent sign. The hollow story she sold to the few neighbors, who still actually listened, was that her flashy new office made the daily commute far too tough. A surface-level truth which was all she ever saw. Nobody on our block bothered to say a single mean thing. Because true justice, like a quiet treasure, rarely arrives with loud fireworks. It is just the heavy weight of a choice you cannot erase, haunting your quiet nights, echoing the exact shallow words you proudly declared when the whole neighborhood was watching. As for Lucas, he kept his garage, keeping that dusty radio right beside his tools. He kept those early 5 o'clock mornings and the handwritten schedule on the fridge, Friday nights with Elijah, and meals of simple sandwiches and black coffee. He never changed into some flashy, different person. He just settled deeper into the quiet soul he had always been. He was a man who knew what we know, that real treasures never shout for attention. And the thin line between a priceless treasure and scrap metal is simply a visionary willing to stop and find the beauty in rusted things others blindly ignore. On late nights, he still held silent conversations with Sarah in that quiet garage. It is the quiet way true love keeps a dialogue alive long after the voice fades. Not from grief, but from knowing that certain invisible bonds never truly end. They simply change their shape. In those quiet moments, he knew she would have recognized the classic's true worth. She would have seen its magic in that junkyard and walked over without hesitation. She would have touched that rusted panel and smiled. "I recognize this beautiful shape." He knew she would be so proud of Wyatt for that perfect name. He was certain she would be. Proud he invested those $100.